Broadcast has been set.
The time is now 5:05. Good evening and welcome to the February 6, 2025 Prince George's County Board of Education Budget Work Session and Public Hearing for FY 2026. I am Brandon Jackson, Chairman of the Prince George's County Board of Education. Thank you all for joining us. Please note that Spanish interpretation services are available during evening's meetings. To access this feature, click the globe icon, at the bottom of the screen. Mr. Bryan, please make this announcement in Spanish.
Ok, buenas tardes a todos y bienvenido a esta sesión de parte de la Junta Educativa. Solamente le queremos informar de que esta sesión va a ser interpretada al español. Si ustedes desean escuchar esa interpretación, pueden hacerle clic al botón de abajo, sería un globo mundo, y van a elegir español. Si no aparece, van a hacerle clic a los tres puntitos y elegir interpretación y elegir español. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. For those unable to observe now, the meeting is being recorded and can be accessed later on the PGCPS YouTube channel. In keeping with the board's Rules of Procedure, Section 4, Internet meetings, the Internet standing rules are as follows. Members shall keep their video on remaining at all times, keep their microphones on mute until recognized by the chairman, raise their hand and hand icon, and wait to be recognized by the chairman, and unmute their microphone to speak and muted when they're done speaking. Members may speak twice on any motion for 2 minutes each. Failure to adhere to the internet standing rules will result in the member being removed until the member can rejoin when the rules can be adhered to. Before we proceed, the chairman reminds everyone to adjust their wireless communication devices to prevent technical interference with the meeting's recording. Please ensure all microphones are muted until the chairman grants you the floor. The chairman reminds all board members to ensure their microphones are turned on while speaking for recording purposes. Lastly, the chairman wishes to inform the public that registration links will be sent for tonight for 7 p.m. to accommodate all additional comments in accordance with the policy 8345 public comment. The public may register on site for public hearings until notified that the testimony registration form is closed. The link can be found on the board's webpage and the board's social media platforms. Ms. Barton, please call the roll.
Good evening, everyone. Dr. Anderful,
Present.
Ms. Boozer-Struther,
Present.
Mr. Briggs,
Present.
Ms. Brown,
Present.
Ms. Goins-McCants,
Present.
Mr. Jongo, Dr. Moss,
Present.
Ms. Walker,
Present.
Mr. Jackson.
Here.
We have 8 present.
Thank you, Ms. Barton. The chairman now yields the floor to Board Member Goins-McCants, Chair of the Operations, Budget, and Fiscal Affairs Committee.
Thank you, Chairman Jackson, and thank you all for being here. I know it's been a lot of incredible work and dedication to get us to this point, to our second budget work session. These sessions are intended to address questions and provide answers regarding the budget. One difference today, each division will have 5 minutes to present their responses to pre-submitted questions, as we have a pretty packed agenda. At this point, the committee chair recognizes Director Smith for the budget process overview. Did we lose Director Smith?
I'm here. Can you hear me okay? Good evening, everyone. I'm Siobhan Smith, Director of Budget and Management Services. So today is just going to be a continuation of the first work session that we had. And in this case, I hope all of you guys have the responses to the questions that you asked for each division. And with that being said, we have quite a few divisions. I think we should just go ahead and get started.
Thank you. The committee chair recognizes Superintendent House to present the response to the pre-submitted questions for the Division of Accountability.
Thank you, Board Member Goins McCants. Good evening, Board members, staff, and members of the Prince George's County community. Thank you all again for being here for this critical work session on the proposed operating budget for the upcoming fiscal year. As you all know, this budget truly reflects our shared commitment to really advancing the academic success and well-being of every child in PGCPS. Tonight, we're going to focus on 6 divisions: accountability, business management services, chief of staff, general counsel, human resources, and IT, as well as the superintendent's office. These divisions, quite frankly, represent the foundation of our efforts to really sustain the high quality education that enables us to really improve the systems and services that support our students. So without any further ado, I'll turn it over to our Chief Accountability Officer that will share responses with a 5-minute maximum, as Board Member Goins McCants indicated. Dr. Strader.
Thank you, Superintendent House. Again, name's Doug Strader, Chief of Accountability. I'm also joined on this call by my most esteemed colleague directors who will be able to assist in providing any greater detail that I may miss or that you may wish to engage in. So I'll provide a high-level summary of the questions that were submitted, and again, then open it up the floor for any additional questions that you have. So when looking at the questions that were submitted, I would like to first focus on the first question. The question was regarding sharing absenteeism data. I would like to expand that question to include many of the metrics, and I wish to share with the board that we do have an extensive availability of data, both we call it, within our firewall anyway, would you say? So our principals, schools, staff have access to absenteeism data, all the different metrics, discipline data, all the different metrics. But to point for this question in particular, I included a link here, and this is to our critical success indicator dashboards. If you would click on the link or access it on the pgcps.org website, again, we have various metrics available that are included within our strategic plan. Absenteeism is just one of them, but academic achievement data, discipline data, all those various metrics are included there. So if you have any questions about that type of information, seeking that information, I would strongly encourage you to go there. You can filter on district, election district, board member district, by school, or look at the district as a whole. So again, very valuable resource to be made available at your fingertips. So that's the first question. Moving forward, there was a specific question within the Strategic Initiatives Office, an additional $1.7 million that looked out of character to be placed there. That is because that particular office is more of a compliance-driven office. Those monies were placed within that office to manage a particular partnership relationship that the district has. And that program is called the Transforming Neighborhood Schools Initiative. It's $1.7 million. There's 3 organizations that are a part of that initiative right now. And I've listed them there within the comments. You can see these here. I will share that moving forward, now that we also have the Community Schools Initiative in place, we're looking at the opportunity of potentially realigning some of these services to that Community School Initiative. So moving forward, as these contracts with these organizations expire, we will be looking to move this information, move these monies, these services over to that Community School Initiative. So that's the explanation of why the $1.7 million is there. And again, it's somewhat of a management pass-through through the Strategic Initiatives Office. So 5 minutes isn't that long, so let me see where else we can go. It looks like there's some specific information regarding grants, the type of grants we have. We've responded to those here. And again, the grants office is representative if you wish to get into these details. The Title I office, there were some questions regarding Title I schools and Title I funding. Please keep in mind the Title I funding comes from the federal government. They identify the pot of monies that's to be shared with states. Then MSDE does a per pupil allocation to each of the districts. And then within the districts, we define how many schools take part in that pot of money that we receive. So the district nor the state actually identifies that initial pot of money that comes from the federal government and their pass-throughs. So within the response, you can see how many schools that we currently have. For this year, we have 107 Title I schools, and we go through that determination process for the following year every spring, between late winter, early spring. We're in the process of identifying those schools for next school year now. So that's the Title I piece. There were some questions about the alignment between the Strategic Planning Office and the Strategic Initiatives Office, two very different offices. The Strategic Planning and Resource Management, I gave a description of what that office is responsible for. They're primarily geared towards grant acquisition and the development of the district strategic plan. The Strategic Initiatives Office, however, was created during COVID, and its primary function was more compliance driven to deal with all of the COVID relating reporting. That was the reopening plan, the ESSER plans, and so on and so forth. But also, as that office began its compliance journey, we received legislation such as Blueprint. So all the Blueprint reporting was associated with this office. Then the Maryland Leads grant was associated with this office, and so on and so on. So as these grants are now turning over, and as we're approaching a window in time, thank you. And as we're approaching a window of time when our strategic plan and our blueprint, our new blueprint plan are merging in a new development cycle, there is interest in the future to align some of these responsibilities. That'll be downstream, but as far as budget's concerned, we're looking at a budget neutral change if and when a change is initiated. So that's a high level summary of the questions that were included here. Please share any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Chief Strader. Board members, do we have any additional questions? I think this has to be a first.
I
Go ahead, Board Member Moss.
can't let Chief Strader go without a question.
Please.
But no, I just want to compliment the data dashboard. I know this is really not the space to do that, but Chief of Staff Boyd showed me and sent me to the data dashboard a couple of days ago. And so I just want to appreciate your work. That seems to be those FTEs seem to be a good payoff, a good trade-off. So I just wanted to uplift us in this space. So thank you all for your work there.
Excellent. Thank you.
Vice Chair Briggs.
Thanks so much, Chair Goins, McCants. I'm always going to get that. Mr. Strader, first, thank you so much for your presentation and for providing information. I'm not sure if you're the exact right person, but you talked about Title I, so I wanted to bring this up if you're the person for this. I noticed that in the budget, it doesn't extrapolate for the different parts of Title I. So Title I Part A, there's like a piece around grant supporting the high concentration of children from low-income families. And I'm specifically asking this question in relation to our charter schools because, our budget for our charters are different than they are for our traditional public schools. And they still have a population of students that are high poverty and that are eligible for funding. So I was just curious, is this something that maybe I missed in the budget, or is there a reason why that's not outlined, or can you kind of just provide some more information on the different sections of Title 1, 2, 3, 4, and whether they're not there in the budget and why not?
So I'm hearing two things related to the question. The first, you were mentioning charter schools and the Title I potential allocation for charter schools. For the response to that, I would defer to our Chief Financial Officer. She can probably share greater insight for that. As far as the other components within the Title I budget, I do have Director Flood here. She can address those components on a high level because that information is available. It just might not be to the detail here. But I'll include Director Flood for comment. Director Flood?
Yes, good evening. So Title I Part A is specifically of what my office addressed, and the schools are identified by a ranking system. So we rank all of our schools in Prince George's County. And within that ranking, we then look at the percentage of our students that are receiving services from the state of Maryland. So it's not at this point anymore specifically of free lunch meals. It's direct services in which our families are actually going to the state of Maryland to seek for support through TANF or WIC within those processes. So it's looking at that direct data for all of our schools in Prince George's County, which includes our charter schools. And this year, we do have one charter school that is a part of Title I for this current school year.
Thank you so much. Vice Chair Brown?
Yes, thank you so much. Quick question. I did see on the questions list, someone did mention about the grants. So kudos to you all for applying I believe you guys applied to 70 and you were able to get 65 out of the 3 years. My question is, do you all have an FTE grant specialist, the person who actually writes the grants for PGCPS? And is there an opportunity where constituents or even myself, of course, could suggest a grant for a possible program with PGCPS?
I'll introduce you to Director Weatherington here in just a minute, but I did wish to clarify the grants, the council grants that you're seeing here, the Office of Strategic Planning and Resource Management, that resource management is the grants component of that office. They entertain all grants that are $25,000 or more. So there are a significant number of other grants that are flowing through the district at the school level and so on and so forth that aren't captured here on this document.
Got it.
But as far as seeking additional monies and so forth, I'll defer to Director Weatherington, and she can share with you some resources that they've recently developed and some path forward for that. Director Weatherington?
Yes, good evening. So we do support all district offices with writing grants. We look to those offices to be the subject matter experts in a lot of areas. So we have grants specialists, both a grants development and a grants management specialist on our team, one of each. And between those two individuals, if there is a proposal that comes out, we go through the proposal and identify areas where we would support on our end, but we also create sort of a tracker or a map for program staff to provide input in areas where they would be best suited to respond to the grant, depending on what the grant details or what they're asking for us to apply to.
Thank you so much. Board Member Walker?
Thank you so much, Chair. Dr. Strader, thanks for answering the questions. You answered my questions within. I did just want to follow up on the grant discussion that we're having right now. As I look at the opportunities that you've written out that your department faces, I see staff capacity, turnaround time, competition, et cetera. I won't read all of them, but I wanted to know from you, what does help look like from the board? I see things like meeting eligibility criteria, like any help that you need from the board. Secondarily, do you have enough staff in order to meet the grant needs that we have as with a $37 million deficit, because we're going to need some. And then thirdly, I know I'm only going to ask three. And then thirdly, the piece on Congressman Glenn Ivey continuously talks about support for grants. And when we were recently there, he gave, they gave some contact information that Board Member Brown can send over to you for assistance in that. So I just wanted to put that out there as well for assistance. Did you remember the other two things I asked, Dr. Strader?
I did. Do we have enough staff?
Okay, good.
And do we, what else can we, or how can the board further assist us in the endeavors? So I can respond to all three of these in writing if that would help. As far as staff's concerned, we do have 2 staff members. Of course, we would always like to have more, but we're always balancing, our budgetary needs with the staff needs. This is one of those return on investments, but we seem to be kicking on all cylinders now, and we're trying to digest as much as we possibly can. As far as the need from the board, first of all, awareness and interest in particular grants is always very helpful. We do thank the board when we do need board certification of grants and the support letters and so forth. The board has been very accepted to us and trying to deal with often very tight timelines to turn things around. So we do appreciate that very much. And so again, it helps to know the interest. So if you come across something, you hear something, let us know, and we will investigate it. But again, we can spend some time and we can share these comments in writing.
Thank you. And for my last 9 seconds, I'd just like to say that if you can communicate to us any grants that we get, we are on this mission to make sure that we are telling our story out loud, and definitely want to be able to highlight that. That'll be great. Thank you.
Thank you both. Seeing no further questions, the committee chair recognizes Superintendent House to present the questions for the Division of Budget and Management Services.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, I'd invite our Chief Financial Officer, Lisa Howell, to come off of mute and entertain any questions for the board at this time.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Lisa Howell. I'm the Chief Financial Officer. I have the pleasure of serving this role for the past year or so. I have joined with me today 7 of my distinguished directors. Nick Venturini, he's over our Benefits and Retirement Services Organization. Frida Waith, Payroll and Absence Management. Phil Hughes, the Director of Risk Management. Siobhan Smith, my budget partner in crime, over the budget office and managing the $3 billion enterprise. Daenerika Johnson, she's the Director of Procurement and Supply Services. And last but not least, we have Peggy Harrison, our newest director, who leads our financial services organization, which includes accounting and financial reporting, accounts payable, treasury, and the Medicaid billing office. I did mention 7 directors. One of them is actually vacant. So we have a Director of Grants and Financial Management Office. So right now I'm kind of wearing that hat as well. But there was a question that was raised, and I'm going to start off with addressing questions that were specific to my division. And then I also received several questions just around the budget in general. So I'll start off with my area specifically. So the Grants and Financial Management Office works very closely with the grants team under SPRM, as Dr. Strader just described. So once the grant comes in the door and it's been actually going through the application process, the Grants Financial Management Office does support the financial aspects of the grant application. So they're involved with the initial application process. And then once we are awarded the grant, that team is now responsible for the life cycle of that grant, including the day-to-day budgeting and accounting for that grant, any reporting or compliance efforts associated with that. So that team right now consists of 14 members, was indicated on the answer sheet. The director position is vacant. But it's similar, it's kind of a combination of the accounting team and my budget team, but it's for grants specifically. So there's both the accounting and budgeting side within that grants organization. So they work very closely with all of the different areas. They work very closely with the program managers as well in the actual execution of the grants and monitoring the spend and making sure that we stay within the grant term and allowable costs associated with that grant. Also received some questions around the other operating expenses for business management services. One thing I always like to point out that when it comes to my division, out of all the areas that I just referenced, there's also the Chief Financial Officer area, and there's an area within my office where we house a lot of our reserves and just centralized managed costs. So sometimes it can kind of get lost in the sauce about my actual operations versus those that are for the district as a whole. But within operating expenses for the division, not including this other reserve area, which we refer to as fixed charges, it's a separate page in the budget book. The other operating expenses, there was a question around some of the costs going up, and I sort of provided an explanation associated with each of those. One thing to keep in mind that when it comes to the management and development of the budget for my area, I really look across the division to make sure that I'm addressing needs within the division and trying to stay within the budget as a whole. And so we will often move funding around between offices, between cost sub-objects, but the overall goal is to stay within budget or to be below budget. So overall, my proposed budget for 2026 is $132,000 less than the current budget for 2025. So while you're seeing some increases in this particular line item, it's not necessarily an overall increase per se, but just shifting dollars around to address priorities for the coming year. There is an item that's in here because other fixed charges is a part of, which was that centralized area that I mentioned. It is a part of the CFO's budget. There's a pass-through relating to private pre-K providers. We receive the funding from the state and the county, and then it's passed through to our private providers. So that is going up. We have to budget for that, but it's a pass-through, but that is an increase in other operating expenses. That was the largest increase. Some of the others are just tied to training, professional development. We're looking to get some new uniforms for the warehouse. So those are the primary drivers within that specific sub-object. The other questions that I received were around the budget in general. So I'll start off with a couple. I think there were just some comparisons to the previous year. Looks like I'm about to run out of time, so maybe I can't get to the other questions, but I will pause here.
You can use my 2 minutes to finish your overview.
Okay. So some of the general budget questions that I received were around looking at the budget for this year or maybe actuals for previous year and what do we have planned. One of them was around relocation costs. The other was around office furniture. Those are items that we don't typically build into our budget every single year. Relocation cost is offered at the discretion of the superintendent, but it's not a recurring item, so there's no dollars budgeted for that in 2026. Office furniture is another one of those that on a one-off basis, different areas may have a need because they have broken furniture and they want to be able to plan for that. So it's not something that we typically carry in the base budget on a regular basis. And to the extent, I know there's been some discussion around a potential move at some point to a new central office facility. Our overall goal with regards to any type of move is to stay within our existing costs that we have associated with that. So to the extent the furniture is usable, we will bring it with us. If the building happens to be furnished and we don't need to purchase any additional furniture, then that's certainly something that we would consider in that subsequent year's budget, if there's any budget dollars in the base for that. There were questions around administration, which is one of our functional areas. So when you look at our 15 categories within that's required by the state in which we present our budget, there were questions around the increase in that. As you think about our biggest costs, they're people costs. So to the extent that we have people and positions, those costs are going to go up every year. With all else being equal, even if we don't increase the number of FTEs, our negotiated agreements will result in an increase every year for COLAs and steps, if that's what's negotiated. So within the administration category, that is one of the largest drivers of what's increasing within that particular functional area. In addition to that, we do have planned in the budget, and Dr. Zuckerman will speak to it a little bit later, the requirement that's needed around getting a new enterprise resource planning application. And so we have costs associated with that reflected in the 26 budget. So that's those are the two largest drivers around that particular increase in that category. Other than that, I will pause here for any further questions that the group may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Howell. Board members, do we have any additional questions? Vice Chair Briggs.
Thanks so much, Chair Goins McCants. Chief Howell, I wanted to just go back to the Title I discussion that I was bringing up earlier, because I wanted to know in the budget book if we are actually funding. I have a charter in my district that has reached out and they're saying that they aren't getting funding for different streams of title funding coming from the federal government, Title I, Title II, that deals with teacher quality and preparedness, Title III that deals with supporting students with learning English as a second language, and then Title IV for grants to improve supports around safe and healthy learning environments. I was just curious if you could speak to if that's the case. I haven't had a chance to read through the budget book, but I just want to confirm because I know you have like a wealth of knowledge here. Our charter is not getting that funding, and if so, can you explain why?
Yeah, I can speak to it at a high level. Each of the different grant programs that we have different program managers, different purposes, different objectives, and so therefore the funds are managed differently. But generally speaking, we don't disperse grant funds directly to the charters. And depending on the nature of the grants, The beneficiary of the funding will be the students. It might be our professionals, it might be our employees. But those resources are managed centrally on behalf of all of our schools and all of our students, regardless of where they are. And so that is the general answer as to why those funds are not directly dispersed to the charters. Now, when we actually went through the COVID years and we received ESSER funding, that was different. So we did identify a portion of those funds that were provided directly to the charters, and they had the autonomy to spend those dollars as they see fit. But generally speaking, we don't disperse grant dollars directly to the charter schools.
Okay, so this sounds like that's a distinction between per pupil versus I think at some point it was going to the school and that shift. I'm not sure if Maryland did it that way, but you're saying per pupil, students are getting the funding based on their specific needs, and charters are getting the same amount of funding.
Well, again, each grant is different in terms of how it's funded. It could be a per pupil amount, it could be a block grant, it just depends. So I'm speaking very generally, but if you want to speak to Title I specifically, so that funding formula that derives or determines how much funding is received will be managed centrally on behalf of all of our students. So they will be able to benefit from the programming or services offered by those grants, but it's not dispersed directly to the charters.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Howell and Vice Chair Briggs. Dr. Moss?
I'm going to roll 3 questions in here real quick. So a charter school would have to participate in our professional development to get Title II funding. I'm curious if that's the answer to that question, because it sounds as if they are wanting access to Title II funding directly, and if it's managed centrally, then is that how that works? The second question I want to uplift is, last year we ended the year not using 2,400 FTEs. We budgeted for 20,000. What do we do with that money that's being allocated throughout the year? How is it danced around? Does it move back to the item? And then the third question that I wanted to uplift, could you say more about what's happening with the payroll office? There seems to have been some challenges with that, but I think you said you fixed the hiring there, so that we shouldn't have any more issues there. So if you just answer those 3 questions pretty quickly.
Sure. So when it comes to professional development that we provide as a district, whether it's funded by Title II or any other funding source, those are our employees. And so we provide that on behalf of all of our employees. So therefore, those funds would not be distributed to the charters if it happens to be a grant, nor would the charters necessarily have to fund or pay for that. We offer that for our employees, and our employees that are PGCPS educators that are staffed at the charters, even though they're in the schools, they're not charter employees or PGCPS employees. And so therefore they would be afforded the opportunity to participate in our professional development. And I'm sure Dr. Baldwin can speak to that further, generally speaking, if you have questions about that. As it relates to the unfilled positions, it's not a simple answer, but the short answer is the dollars are utilized in a different capacity. So depending on what the vacancy is for, if the position was not filled, we may have substitutes that we hired instead. So those dollars now are utilized to fund substitutes. It may result in overtime. So perhaps if we had a vacant position that now required us, let's say vacant in bus drivers, we would now end up potentially paying more money for either temporary bus drivers or for overtime. So if we have a budgeted position that's not filled, those dollars are now utilized to pay for someone to replace that work, either in the form of overtime or in the form of a substitute. And then the third question was around the payroll office.
Can we come to that question when we get to our second round?
Sure, I'm trying to just jam it all in real quick. And then with regards to the payroll
We want to
office.
make sure we have time to get everyone's questions, at least the first round, and then we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Board Member Walker.
Hi, and thank you. Chief Howell, this is just a what if scenario. So I'm looking and and thank you for answering the questions online already. I'm looking at the restricted grants, and I recognize that those are grants that are restricted clearly for those specific things. So let's take homeless education, for instance, and I know we can't do anything else around that. Those are specifically for that. I'm thinking forward on what's happening in the world with, in a country with federal grants, et cetera. I'm looking to understand, is there a plan B for specific targeted groups like homeless education, fine arts grant special education in the event that funds are pulled? And I'm asking that because I don't see them in our unrestricted funds, for instance, so specifically around homeless education, for instance. I'm sure it's there, perhaps, but if in case it's not, what is our plan B to also continue to help this population? Thanks.
So as it relates to our federal grants, based off of what we know now, those that are tied to one of our, our various entitlement grants that are tied to some sort of formula, they're not impacted by what might be happening on a broader scale at the federal level. I think from a restricted grant standpoint, or from a federal grant, from a federal fund standpoint, the primary insight that we're trying to get answers around now is on our reimbursement for food nutrition services. We still don't really know what that is going to look like. For 2025, those funds have already been appropriated, but as we're just thinking about any potential changes going forward, we don't quite know. We haven't been able to get confirmation around what that's going to look like. But based off of what we know right now, the funding that we receive at the federal level that passes through to the state, that is expected to continue on a going forward basis. The other grant funding that we receive is not from the state, that's not tied to federal funds, that will still continue. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thanks, I'm all set.
Thank you. We do have time for a second round. Board Member Moss.
So if you could answer my question about the payroll office, but I also would like additional clarity around the excess dollars. Like what do we do with that? Is it just a pot of money that we go into? Like, what's the equity around it?
Yeah, sure. I'll explain that a little bit more. I was kind of rushing against the clock. So every year, throughout the year, we go through a process called a financial review. And that is where we determine where we may have savings during the year where we want to realign those funds for a different purpose. Oftentimes we will have savings, quote unquote, resulting from positions that are vacant. So we plan for the positions to be filled during the year. We also have an assumption that there's going to be some level of salary lapse or vacancy associated with those positions as well. So even though they're planned to be filled at a high level, we also plan that there's going to be some salary lapse already built into our budget. So there's not always going to be savings associated with our positions because we do plan for some level of lapse. But to the extent our projected lapse is going to be greater than what we planned, those dollars are now available to meet other needs in the district. Oftentimes those other needs revolve around work that has to be redistributed because of vacant positions. That includes if you had a budgeted teacher position that's now not filled, you have to hire a substitute. So those dollars that were set aside for the position is now going to be utilized to fund a substitute teacher. So it's realigning the dollars to be utilized in a different capacity, but it doesn't necessarily just fall to the bottom line. It's not being used at all. It is realigned to cover other requirements that may come up during the year associated with that work. Sometimes once we've been able to identify and cover the needs associated with the vacancy for overtime, substitutes, temporary positions, there may be other needs or priorities within the district as well. That savings can be utilized to cover those needs as they may arise. But typically it's around trying to redistribute those funds to cover the work resulting from the positions being vacant. Does that answer your question? Okay. So in the last 10 seconds that I have, it's hard to answer these so quickly. For the payroll office, we are fully staffed. We have gone through a process in the last year where we had several vacancies, but many of those have now been filled, and so we're in a better place. Keep in mind, we process 25,000 payroll checks every single pay cycle. So the volume of work that's associated with that, where there could be something that requires follow-up, can oftentimes be time consuming, and we do our best to get to those inquiries as quickly and as efficiently as we can. But that can impact the level of efficiency that we're able to reach and support all of our employees.
Thank you, Chief Howell. Vice Chair Brown.
Yes, I was going to yield my time to Chief Howell if she had any additional information for Board Member Moss's question over.
Yeah, I'd like to turn it over to Frida Waith, our payroll director, so she can speak more so to some of the challenges that she faces on the payroll processing side, but also the absence management side as well. And we have gone through a restructuring this past year to help achieve greater efficiencies in how that work is being executed.
Good evening. Again, my name is Delphida Waith. I'm the Director of Payroll Services. And yes, we are going through a reorganization process to enhance the work that the payroll office performs. So with that being said, we are actually in a training process this current year to ensure that the new staff is acclimated to the payroll processes that we present to our employees, the 22,000 employees that Lisa was speaking of. So as we working through the nuances of the new staff coming on board, yeah, we have experienced some lapse in customer service, but that is our number one goal, to ensure that all customers are handled in an efficient manner and a timely manner with all the information that is needed to resolve their issues.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure for clarity, do we have the question answered of, do you all have enough people to handle that? Do we have enough people currently to handle that work stream?
Yes, we do have enough people currently. In the past year, the last fiscal year, we were out of approximately half the staff, either through leave, terminations, or promotions. So with that, as we came into this new year, all those positions have been filled. And so now we're fully staffed. So yes, we do have enough staff to accommodate the 22,000 employee increase.
I will add that on top of human capital, what's important here is the outdated computer systems that, and I'm sure Dr. Zuckerman can speak to that. It is something that is critical and that will be needed to, we'll need to address at some point, but it is on our radar, quite expensive when we talk about budget, but it's something that will make us a lot more efficient on top of the human resources that we have in payroll as well.
You have about 1minute and 40 seconds. Does somebody want to speak to those computer systems, or you want to wait until we get to IT? I didn't know what section that was in because it came up times.
The only other thing I'd like to add is that as it relates to the system, which Dr. Zuckerman will speak to more in his section, it does impact greatly the work across the division, but also across the district. We're not the only user of it, but it does impact our team's work greatly on the purchasing side, on the accounts payable side, on the treasury side, our budgeting tool, accounting application, and as you heard, payroll and absence management. It does also impact risk management as well as benefit services. So my division is a heavy user of having a modern day technology application that will allow for our work to be a lot more efficient. It's not just about throwing additional people. It is looking at our processes, but then also having a system that can help support that work.
Thank you so much, Chief Howell. I do not see any more hands. So the chair recognizes Superintendent House to present the responses to the pre-submitted questions for the division of the Chief of Staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, I'll ask our Chief of Staff, Mrs. Quincy Boyd, to come off of mute and share any insight in and around the questions that came in. Chief Boyd.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Superintendent House, Chair McCants, and members of the board. It's good to see you all. And I'm Quincy Boyd, Chief of Staff here at Prince George's County Public Schools. In my capacity, my primary responsibility, as many of you know, is to support the superintendent's initiatives and act sort of as the lead liaison in facilitating cross-collaboration across our divisions. Joining me today, I have Ms. Robin Seabrook, who is our Senior Hearing Officer from the Office of Appeals. I also have Robin Welsh, who's the Director of Government Relations, Compliance, and Procedures. That's a mouthful. And then additionally, I also have the Executive Director of the Excellence in Education Foundation. We have provided responses to the 4 questions that were pre-submitted. And before I turn it over to Robin Seabrook to address the appeals question, I just want to address the question that is related to instructional contracted services. Chair Goins McCants, I believe that was your question. And so that is a strategic partnership that we have with College Track and the Kevin Durant Center in the amount of $250,000. I believe it is on page 71 of the budget book. That partnership, that memorandum of understanding is expected to end in June of 2027. But we are currently serving roughly 230 students through that strategic partnership. And so I hope that addresses your question. And for the question regarding appeals, I'm going to bring up Ms. Robin Seabrook to address FTEs. Robin, do we have you?
Sure, yep, I'm here. Good afternoon, good evening. I'm Robin Seabrook, Senior Hearing Administrator in the Office of Appeals and Hearings. The question was about details regarding staff and appeals. And so we have 7 FTE in the Office of Appeals. It includes 4 hearing officers, a administrative staff person, our court liaison, and our case manager. There are additional pieces of this question that may be better suited and better posed to the Office of General Counsel, because another part of this question is about litigation for school years 23 and 24. Any appeals that come out of our office from our decisions go to the Board of Education, and sometimes they end up in litigation. So, and that is handled by the Office of General Counsel. And so that question is better posed to Mr. Henderson, who I know is here, who is prepared to address that. I think we were seeking some clarity around the question around those expenditures. I think that answers the question with respect to my office.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you so much, Robin. And then there's another question, and it is related to the Excellence in Education Foundation, which does have a dotted reporting line to the Chief of Staff Division. So the answer to the question, which we did provide to you in writing, is that the foundation and the partnerships office do exist. The partnership office reports to the Associate Superintendent of Communications and Community Engagement. And the foundation is a separate 501c3 that supports our school system. We did link the board of directors in the response. And then you should also see, I believe on page 79, the structure of the partnerships office. And so with that, with 40 seconds left, I will yield my time back to you all to answer any additional questions you have.
Dr. Moss?
Thank you so much for your questions. Your response said both the foundation and the partnership team manage charitable giving, but they're in completely different spaces in the organization. How might it help the organization to bring those functions together? Or is there a process already in place to bring those functions together while they don't sit in the same spot? I would imagine we want to raise more money. And so how we can build a strong team to do that. I'm just curious about the placement. One sits in one side of the house, the other one, but they're both doing charitable foundations work.
True. I'm going to answer one part of that, but I also do have the director on, Ms. Thea Wilson, who can chime in. The one thing that I think is important for you all to know is that for the partnerships office, there's a threshold, and that threshold is $50,000. And so anything that exceeds that threshold, of course, there's an individual that decides they'd like to support Prince George's County Public Schools, we ensure that they have an opportunity to connect with the foundation. But what I will say is both the foundation and the partnerships office work collaboratively to find those resources and essentially to push those resources directly to our schools. And if there's anything that you would like to add that I'm missing, please feel free to come off of mute.
Good evening, everyone. Again, I am Thea Wilson, Executive Director of the Excellence in Education Foundation for Prince George's County Public Schools Incorporated. And Chief Boyd did outline exactly how we function currently. Both of our departments work together in facilitating donations that come into our school district to benefit our scholars. We have established, as she mentioned, thresholds to ensure that there's enough staff to support some of the in-kind donations that come into our school district. And the Partnerships Office generally facilitates those type of donations up to a $50,000 threshold. And anything over that, I typically handle with the donor.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wilson.
You're welcome.
Chair Briggs.
Or Vice Chair, and thank you so much, Chair Goins McCants. I'm going to follow the lead of Chief Boyd, who said to go to OGC for the question that I posed. So thank you for that. I'm just going to, I guess this is going to Mr. Henderson. If you're able to answer this right now, that's great. If not, that's completely fine. But really the question was, can you provide details of the total settlement costs incurred in school year 2023 and school year 2024?
Good afternoon, Board Member Briggs. I do not see that question posed to us, but we can definitely get that data back to you. The question that we received was around contractual attorney expenditures. So we can definitely pull that data and have it back to you in 24 hours.
Thank you.
Board members, do we have any additional questions? Board Member Walker.
Yeah, this is only for consideration. Thank you so much, everybody, for answering the questions that were submitted to you. It's more for the superintendent's consideration to think about engagement, community engagement falling under the chief of staff's role. I just think that it's such a critical thing that we need right now. And given that, I mean, I haven't talked to Chief Boyd about this, so I don't know what her feelings are about this, but I do believe that with where we are now, needing to engage with our community even more than ever, I think that it is just so tied into the superintendent, and just wanted to throw that out there for consideration as you think about organization. Thanks.
Thank you, Board Member Walker. Dr. Moss.
I was raising my hand if there's a round two. Okay. I appreciate Board Member Walker's sentiments. I want to stamp those. I think it makes sense. This partnership piece, I really would like the question answered. Do you believe it would make more sense to have these functions working with one another? It seems to be they're both fundraising. I would love to hear an answer around, would it make sense for these functions to be consolidated into the same space, doing the same work to function strategically, to fundraise and ensure we have access to resources? And if not, what processes are in place to ensure that, given our budget deficit, it would behoove us to get all that we can. And so strategic alignment of our existing resources to get there is overwhelmingly important. So is it working? What processes are in place to make it work now?
And what I will say is that I've asked both our Associate Superintendent of Communications as well as Thea Wilson, who is in charge of our foundation, to come together. I actually was a part of that first meeting to connect and talk about systems and processes. They are in the process of developing what that congruence can look like, and what those different efficiencies should look like as well. They should be reporting back to me very soon to take systems that have been in place for quite some time, for a number of years, to really refine them and ensure that we're doing the most for our dollars, for our children when it's all said and done.
Thank you so much, Superintendent House. Dr. Moss, was that?
So I can walk away from this call saying that we're not sure if it's working, so we're investigating if it's working, and we'll have recommendations in the future.
That's safe to say.
Thank you both so much. Board Member Brown?
Yes, thank you so much. I just had a quick question. I wondered if, number one, if it was okay if a layperson in Prince George's County could donate to PGCPS. But number two, is that accessible through the website? Because when I'm looking at the homepage, I don't see an indication where anyone can actually donate to PGCPS. Maybe I'm missing it, but if you guys can provide that information, that would be great. Thank you.
We'd be glad to do that in writing, but in short, we're not going to turn down money. And we want to ensure that every dollar is effectively provided to the students and where it needs to go at the school level.
Yeah, I think it would be wise too that if we may have some sort of illustration or, hey, this is what $1,000 did. This is what $10,000 did. This is what $5,000 did. That way people can kind of get an idea of what their money actually does for public schools or for PGCPS for that matter. Just a recommendation.
And we definitely have some of that at the foundation level. I know Mrs. Wilson puts together kind of a menu of sorts and on an annual basis during our annual gala and one other event, golf tournament, where people can kind of choose from that menu and it lets them know exactly where those dollars are going and what it's for. But we'd be glad to share that information.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing no more hands, the chair recognizes Superintendent House to present the responses to the pre-submitted questions for the Office of General Counsel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll actually ask our General Counsel, Mr. Darnell Henderson. I think there he is. Darnell Henderson to come off of mute and reflect on any questions that were asked in the allotted 5 minutes. Mr. Henderson.
Yes, sir. Yep. Thank you, Superintendent House. Good evening, board members. My name is Darnell Henderson. For those of you that do not know, I have served Prince George's County Public Schools for the last 3 years and within the last 18 months as the General Counsel. And so we provided our answers to the pre-submitted questions. Before I jump in, I have with me Miss Lisa Blades, our Legal Compliance Coordinator, and Miss Cindy Gilday, who is our e-discovery specialist from the Office of General Counsel. And before we jump into the pre-submitted questions, Vice Chair Briggs asked a question regarding settlements, and I have the data that he's requested. For FY23, the settlement amount was $1,236,872.60. For FY24, the amount was $339,750. And so the reason for the discrepancy between the 2 years, the large amounts for settlement, is that we settled a gender discrimination case in FY23 in the amount of $900,000. And so that is why from year to year, the numbers look just a little askew regarding settlement fees. One of the things that I wanted to highlight for the board is that since 2021, the Office of General Counsel has been understaffed. Within the last year, we've been able to fill critical positions and vacancies in anticipation and in desire to decrease the reliance on external counsel. We've also had a number of complex federal litigation matters, and with the vacancies, we've had to rely on some external counsel to provide support with facing additional lawsuits and challenges. But our goal is to find ways to save dollars and to utilize in-house counsel as much as possible. As you know, since January 1st, with the new administration, the Office of General Counsel has been inundated with questions, concerns, and issues regarding the executive orders around racial indoctrination in K-12 schooling, immigration, Title IX, transgender students, gender and sports participation, which is an executive order that came out today. So we've been working with our partners throughout the organization to support with the questions that have come to our division regarding how to deal with the new administration's executive orders and what's the best way to support our students and families while we do that. One of the things I want to also highlight for the board is that, as I'm sure you know, the Maryland Supreme Court just came down with a verdict regarding the Child Victims Act on February 3rd. The Maryland Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of the Child Victims Act of 2023 pertaining to survivors of childhood sexual abuse who seek compensation from their abusers and institutions that foster the abuse without any limitations on when the survivors can bring their claim. So what that essentially means, and we currently have a few of these matters that are pending, but what this currently means is that if you are an individual and make allegations regarding being sexually abused or mistreated from a sexual perspective during your time with PGCPS, and that happened maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago, there is no statute of limitations for you to bring those claims. So we are looking to make sure that we are very staffed and ready to go to defend the district when those claims come. But that will be something that we are keeping an eye out moving forward into FY26. We had a question here regarding license fees. What I wanted to just highlight is that this is not a new line item, but that we just pulled it out and realigned it so that the software licensing is in line with the corresponding budget description. And then here, Ms. Howell, Chief Howell, notated that for FY26, the legal fees budget is flat to FY25 and approximately $10,000 less than FY24 actuals. And that can be found on page 68 of our budget book. And with 28 seconds left, I don't have anything else, but I will await questions if there are any.
Thank you so much. Board members, do we have any questions? Dr. Moss?
Mr. Henderson, I just want to thank you for your leadership and thank you ahead of the future. I want to thank you for the future for what you will have to deal with. So thank you for being thoughtful and planning to be able to fight on behalf of our children. And so thank you for your 3 years here. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Do we have any more questions for the Office of General Counsel? Seeing none. The committee chair recognizes Superintendent House and the Division of Human Resources.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll ask our Chief Human Resources Officer, Dr. Christy Baldwin, to come off of mute and share any insights that she has around the questions that board members have submitted. Chief Baldwin.
So good evening. I'm going to try to stick with my colleagues in the 5 minutes. So I want to just thank the board members for this opportunity and the superintendent for the introduction. I am Christy Murphy Baldwin, the Chief of Human Resources for the Division of Human Resources, which is responsible for securing and recruiting PGCPS talent. And then once they come into the district, growing them so that hopefully they will stay with us. Within our division, we actually have 5 departments. I know a lot of times people think that HR is just HR, but actually there is a department of HR, which is overseeing operations and staffing. But then there's also the wonderful Department of Professional Learning and Leadership. There is Office of Employee Performance. There is Equity, Diversity, and Belonging. And there's also Employee and Labor Relations. Tonight, I am so happy to have with me Dr. David Reese, our Director of Equity, Diversity, Belonging, and Dr. Christy Matthews, our Director of Professional Learning and Leadership. They are holding on because the other 3 directors are very sick right now, and Dr. Reese is very close to that as well. So I'm going to just try to move very fast so he can go back to bed. But he wanted to be here tonight. One of the things that's important, and the reason why I highlight the 5 different departments, is because I actually have 180 individuals that work within the division. So I know that there was a question about non-local travel, and what I try to say, so within the chief budget, I do have money to support them as employees. Oftentimes because they are the recruiters and staffers, I like to remind people they too work in PGCPS. They too are the employees that we care deeply about, and they are what we call our first responders. So the money for non-local travel that's in the chief budget is to support their learning and their growth. Tonight, so in summary, just digging into our FY26 budget, most, if not all of our budget is related to Blueprint Pillar 2. So Human Resources is the owner of that pillar. And a lot of our funding is actually for mandates that are unfunded by Blueprint, such as recruitment, supporting our teacher programs and initiatives, building our teacher leaders, as also looking at building more nationally board certified teachers, which I do want to give a huge plug to our Office of Professional Learning and Leadership. If you are not aware, Prince George's County Public Schools is in the top 5 school districts in the country that has the largest number of nationally board certified teachers of color. And most recently, we were cited as the #1 school district in Maryland to have new candidates choosing to pursue the nationally board certification. So we're very proud of that. We're increasing our licensure requirements. The board has always been very gracious in helping us with supporting those career professionals who want to switch to education. So one of the things I want to point out for our budget, because we do know the times that we're in, we actually moved money from different costing streams within our own budget to support these initiatives. So there was a question about the increase in instructional services in professional learning from professional, and that's because we realigned those funds to pay for a lot of the initiatives from Blueprint. Also, there was a question about special education, and I provided a pretty long response, but I wanted to just highlight that our recruitment team, especially on the instructional side, a lot of the non-local travel money that's identified is actually for our recruitment. So they are responsible for going all around the country, recruiting and bringing in great talent for our L population, our special ed population, for all of our hard to staff positions. And they actually start every year in September with their recruitment. So we've had several job fairs that we've attended. And within the next month, we also have trips coming to the University of Texas system, as well as New Mexico. We have a visiting teacher program with Spain. So we do send our immersion staff over there to recruit teachers to come over here. And lastly, there was a question about positions. So under staffing, there is an office called Compensation in Class, and that we're responsible in Human Resources for maintaining the district org chart, always looking at positions when they're asked to be created, and then making sure that we follow our process for creating positions through using the position description questionnaire, benchmarking with other districts, and then always questioning when we see different things. So for the district org chart, yes, there have been positions that were looked at to, I'm getting ready to run out of time, so I'm going to stop. And I will follow up. I will follow up and say, what questions might you have for us?
Board Member Boozer Struthers.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair. I wanted to address the blueprint, and I appreciate that you noted that we actually, in addition to funded mandates of the blueprint law, we actually have been spending funds to basically set PGCPS on a course to fully implement the blueprint between through 2030, the original plan, but now SB 429 is calling for a full $1 billion reduction over the next 8 years in funding to PGCPS. And we may need to bring Chief Howell back for this discussion, but at this point in time, how do we say to our educators in Pillar 2 that these funds will actually be there for these educator raises and to continue to fund national board certified teachers? Because at this point in time, this $1 billion cut is not matched with where the programmatic changes would happen. So I'd appreciate a discussion about that because you've just touched on one of the most critical and urgent messages that we need to convey, that our teachers, that the funds are not going to be there for the raises. Thank you.
Do you want me to respond, or is that a note for us to come back at a later time?
Well, I didn't know if you knew the dollar amounts as well as Chief Howell, who met with the Policy and Governance Committee today. So if Chief Howell needs to address this reality of this bill, I just wanted you to defer if that wasn't, if this analysis of the bill hasn't been part of your work yet.
Right. I can defer the overall blueprint. I can only speak to the pillar 2, which says, for example, our educators by it's not 26 or 27 we have to have a base salary of 60,000. We currently, I think, have 59. So we're close to that, maybe 58, 59. There is no money for the nationally board certified teacher program and work. So, and it is costly to become nationally board certified. So I will turn it over to Chief Howell if she wants to talk about the larger funding that flows through all 5 pillars.
So we are at time, and we do have some board members with questions. I have a brief question, and then I will yield the rest of my time for you to answer that question after we get the board members who have their hands raised. Dr. Moss?
Yeah, thank you for pulling this together and responding to all of my questions. You just said $50,000 that is for non-local travel. We do that for recruitment. I'm curious if that's enough money, particularly when there's the governor's bill actually promotes going out of state to recruit new teachers, because we're lessening not necessarily lessening our requirements, but creating an opportunity for other folks to onboard into teaching. So is $50,000 enough for non-local travel? I also didn't see a line item for travel for just teacher recruitment in general. So yeah, do you have enough money to do what you want to do?
So the 50,000 supports the entire division and supporting those specific employees should they want to invest in their own professional learning, if they go to a conference, or if they need to take some type of training. So that is set for the 180 individuals that are within the division. As far as the recruitment budget, which I believe Board Member Goins McCants asked about, that one, I don't have the actual dollar value off the top of my head, because we did actually move money from various cost streams to increase our budget without asking for it. Because during the pandemic, a lot of career fair organizations and colleges and universities moved to more virtual career fairs. But now they have actually gone back to in-person. They've increased the registration fee. So we had to realign funds within the overall budget to increase that budget. And then, of course, we are always working with communication for our advertising campaigns. So to ask, do we have enough? I would have to say we never have enough, but I also want to be a good steward of the funds and really map out what we need before asking for additional money, just to make sure that the places we are going, they are actually yielding the teacher candidates and employee staffs that we need.
Thank you, Dr. Baldwin. Board Member Walker?
Thank you so much. And I'll yield if any time is left this round and the second round to Ms. Howell if she needs. But I think, the governor's plan is relatively new. I'm imagining that you all need some time to go back and look at what is the overall impact. Some of what we asked Ms. Howell on the Policy and Governance Committee is help us to be able to understand and be educated, and then help us educate our legislators, whereby we're saying this is what the real impact is. This is what it looks like when we talk about blueprint. For instance, this is what it looks like when it talks about teacher salaries. So anything that we can do to make it tangible to right now and what that means for in the schoolhouse will be super helpful as you all go through it. I don't expect the answer for tonight, but just wanted to give you perspective on that. Also, Dr. Moss already asked the one about recruitment out of state. I did want to ask about the Office of, and I know I'm not saying it right, Diversity and Belonging, Mr. Reese's, Dr. Reese's. You know, as Mr. Henderson noted, the impact of folks calling there because of all of these executive orders and questions around our diverse population here in Prince George's County. I'm wondering if you all have thought about whether or not you need to shift or increase temp staff needed for this belonging piece. I'm not really sure how you all are thinking about that. So maybe you can take some time just to think about how are you thinking about shifting to help our scholars, if any?
You know, what I will say, Board Member Walker, is that we are thinking through this. We put together a federal transition task force, formerly known as our immigration task force, because we know that there's a lot that goes along with this federal transition. So this, while it hasn't come directly to the table as of yet, it is an agenda item that we have for the future to really think about. You know, are there things that we need to think about in terms of blind spots? Are there things that we need to create? Are there things that we need to sunset? So we're thinking through all of that with this federal transit. I think it's made up of maybe 10 or 15 people right now, and we're expanding it as needed. Mr. Reese is actually a part of that federal transition task force, and will continue to do the work.
Thank you. That's sufficient for my answer for now, Dr. Baldwin. I think Superintendent House, if I could ask that, you know, this is ever changing by minute, and maybe in our next executive board meeting, you can give us an update on that, and then we can be ready for you to be able to tell the public in the future kind of where we are. Thanks so much.
Thank you both. I want to make sure I give Chief House some time to answer her question and talk about that. I also wanted to clarify that my question was around the roughly $150,000 reduction that you all have in your proposed budget coming specifically out of that recruitment area. And so that's why the question was, if we have that big of a reduction, will we have any negative impacts to recruitment given the amount of vacancies we have right now?
Oh, thank you for that clarification. We actually moved money from one costing string to the other to actually support this work. So I can work with Chief Howell to update the question if that would provide more clarity.
It would, thank you. And then Chief Howell, yielding the rest of the time for you.
Thank you. So I'll just provide a brief overview about the proposed legislation, which is basically to delay a component of the funding and the work for the blueprint around collaborative planning. So we receive foundational funding to the district for every single student. And out of that foundational funding, it's intended to cover increasing salaries for teachers, career counseling, behavioral health, preparing our students to be college and career readiness, maintenance of schools, supplies for teachers, technology. That is the base foundation funding that we receive to cover basically the core operations of the district. A portion of that funding also included collaborative planning, and that now has been put on pause from it was supposed to go into effect in 2026. It's now been pushed back to 2030. So that means the planned per pupil amount that we would have received for collaborative planning won't take into effect right now. The challenge with that, however, is that our base foundation funding is already not sufficient enough to cover some of the items that I just referenced with regards to increased salaries, providing maintenance for our schools, et cetera. So now to have that delayed even further, it has a direct impact on all of our operations of the district, including our schoolhouse, because that foundational funding, 75% of it at least, is allocated to the schools. So with that being an impact over the next 8 years until 2033, that overall impact is $1 billion of lost revenue to the district. For 2026 specifically, it's a $22 million hit. So you can't have that kind of an impact without it impacting the district across the board.
Thank you so much for explaining, Chief Howell. Seeing no more hands, the committee chair recognizes Superintendent House to present the responses for the Division of Information Technology.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And at this time, I'd like to invite Dr. Andy Zuckerman to unmute and answer any or provide any insight or additional questions that the board may have in reference to information technology. Dr. Zuckerman.
Thank you, Mr. House. Good evening, board members. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you about our budget request. I'll just keep my response at a high level because we had a number of questions. I thought that Ms. Brown's question about the $15.2 million increase in technology and what goes into that, I think is a good jumping off point because it covers some of the things we talked about earlier. So that increase is really tied to three different things. The first, you've heard about a new ERP system, Enterprise Resource Planning System. That's our business information system. We use Oracle, as you all know. We were in the vanguard in the DMV. We were the first district to use Oracle back in 2002, well-established track record with it. And that system is essentially reaching its end of life. The next generation and upgrade for Oracle would be moving to the cloud. And while we were in the vanguard, a number of our neighbors have now moved to the cloud: Montgomery, Arlington, Fairfax, Baltimore County, Harford County. So this does have an impact on just overall performance of the system. Just like you would have any computer that you've used for a long time, it starts to move slower, doesn't perform as well. So we need to upgrade and modernize the business information system. The annual recurring license for that is not that much more than what we pay. We pay about $2.2 million a year for Oracle now. The cloud version would be a small, modest increase, a few $100,000 increase. The issue with a business system upgrade is the implementation. It is a massive. We thought the student information system was big. The business information system is huge. It touches HR, payroll, budget, finance, accounting, accounts payable, absence management, benefits. So it takes several years. It has to be really carefully coordinated. It requires an outside consultant to do. All the districts that I just mentioned have all gone before us and used an implementer. And it is to the tune of $8-9 million for a 1 year, and that would 1 year implementation. Then we have to do that a couple more years before we get out of the implementation phase. So that's the business system. And that's what you see there with that, Ms. Brown. The next part around Synergy, $2.7 million, that's the Synergy annual license. And you see that there was a couple of questions about that in the Department of Student Applications. Why is there an increase in software license there? Two reasons. One, our old system, SchoolMax, was relatively inexpensive relative to a modern day system. So a modern day student information system, unfortunately, it just costs more money. And on top of that, we were able to fund that system this year through ESSER federal dollars, Elementary Secondary School Relief Fund dollars. Those dollars have expired, so we now need to shift that into the operating budget. So that's why you see a $2.7 million increase there, because A, it's a more expensive system, and B, it's coming off of the federal grant into the operating budget. And similarly, the question about digital tools, these are not so much classroom intervention tools. These are things like Zoom that we're using now, Google for Education, Canvas, some other, I'm just thinking, I'm looking at the tools, Hapara, which is a classroom management tool, Microsoft, Adobe. These are all digital tools that we use on a regular basis that, again, were being funded through ESSER and that now are coming off of that grant and need to be placed into the operating budget. The ESSER funds expired on September 30th, 2024. And that does create a major fiscal hit to us. I do want to just tie it to the questions that Ms. Boozer-Struther had asked about the hardware, because we were funding a huge amount of the hardware, both student Chromebooks, staff laptops, smart boards, a bunch of infrastructure hardware was being funded out of ESSER. We are still one-to-one, Ms. Boozer-Struther. We still have the funding this year that allows that to happen. We do have about half our schools that have moved the Chromebooks into carts in the building to preserve the life cycle. It's not just about the damage. It's also there's administrative, there's less burden, and it's easier to distribute and facilitate. It has resulted in about a 50% decrease so far in the breakage rate, which is really good because that'll help us in the long term. The question really is around the long-term sustainability. I'll just finish up the long-term sustainability about sustaining a one-to-one program. And I was just on a call today with CIOs from all across the state having the exact same question with their boards of education. As long as we can continue to fund this through our lease purchase program, then we'll be okay. But I think that's just a question for whether or not we can do that. So I'll pause there. I know there's a couple other questions. I get to cybersecurity and a couple other things, but I just wanted to touch on those high levels. So thank you for that time.
Thank you, Chief Zuckerman. Board Member Brown?
Yeah, thank you so much, Chief Zuckerman. This was definitely very helpful information. So I definitely wanted you to touch on the cybersecurity aspect because I think that's really important for our PTCPS families to understand a little bit more.
Yep. So that was a question that was in here. And cybersecurity we have embedded throughout this entire budget. We have a number of different strategies from endpoint protection to multi-factor authentication to web filtering to firewall protection and more. And I would be happy to go through that in great detail with you. We tend not to talk too much in detail publicly about all the puts and takes of cyber in the event that there are any nefarious actors paying attention. So there is some privileged and confidential information. I'd be happy to go deeper with you, but it's spread throughout the budget. For example, Google for Education, which we pay for in the Department of Technology and Integration, not our network operations, our technology operations department, has major security features that we're paying for example. Whereas our multi-factor authentication tools, we're paying for out of our technology operations budget. And again, I can get into some of the details about what they are, how they work, how we configure them in a privileged and confidential session. But it is spread throughout this entire budget.
Board members, do we have any additional questions? Board Member Walker?
Yeah, this is just a really quick one. I just thought about, given the weather or anything else that might happen, and let's just say we're home for a period of time. I don't know what the trigger is to, that Superintendent House has to enact anything like virtual learning, but in the event, so I don't want to talk about that now, but in the event virtual learning is ever enacted again, I'm just wondering, do we have anything, I know we don't have cushions, so don't laugh already, but do we have anything that's really helping us to make sure that the internet is available for our scholars?
That's a great question. So we have, and this ties to the question that Board Member Boozer-Strother asked about, are we prepared for virtual learning in the event of a prolonged state of emergency? That's what we have an approved plan for. If we had a prolonged state of emergency, in that situation, we would deconstruct our Chromebook carts, we would push chargers and Chromebooks out to our students. So that's the hardware. We are still sitting on a good number of hotspots left over from the pandemic that we purchased with ESSER funding, that if we needed to then re-enable them, we could redirect funding to pay for internet service to the hotspots if we needed to. Believe it or not, the internet connectivity was not as, or the lack thereof was not as huge of a concern as we thought it would be during the pandemic. We had issued, just for example, we had issued over 2,000 hotspots. And at the height of the pandemic, in the height of virtual learning, less than 150 of those hotspots were actually enabled and active, which told us that, and students were still connected and submitting their work. So that need wasn't as great as we anticipated, but we are ready. And we still do use them today, by the way, with our McKinney-Vento office and some home and hospital teaching as needed. So we do have that on a limited basis.
No, thank you. As long as we're ready, and it sounds like we are. So thank you very much. And to know that our need isn't as great as we once thought is also a winner. Thank you.
Any additional questions, board members? I did have one just on difference in terms of the conversation around our business information system versus our student information system. So you said the business information system, those are mainly setup costs, getting it all up and running, and then we're expecting it to go down some. Are we expecting the cost for Synergy to be the same or at this high year over year going forward?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's just the licensing costs. And we were really careful when we negotiated with them to make sure that our costs were the same as Montgomery and Charles and Howard and Fairfax and everybody else used Synergy. And I specifically said, I said, I cannot talk to our Board of Education if our per pupil is higher than Montgomery County. Absolutely not. So we did that due diligence, and we of course will do the same with Oracle because we have good benchmarking. But yeah, it's just the cost. We were, just so you know, our SchoolMax system, we were hosting on-prem all the data, our servers, everything here in-house in Prince George's. A modern day system is now cloud hosted, and there's just much more increased costs associated with external hosting than when we do it here. So it's just the nature of the beast. We rode SchoolMax as long as we could, but eventually we had to make the switch.
And I want to make sure you have the rest of this time. Was there anything else that we didn't cover that is important for the board to know?
I just want to say thank you for your support. The Board of Education in Prince George has always been hugely supportive of student technology and staff technology and just keeping us modern and keeping pace with our neighbors and just with the times. So we really appreciate that, and I very much appreciate your support.
Thank you, Chief Zuckerman. Seeing no more questions, we're going to recognize Superintendent House. I don't see any questions on here for the Division of the Superintendent's Office, but I am not sure if we had any board member questions about it or if Superintendent House, you wanted to still present to us.
I'd be glad to answer any questions. Of course, the lion's share of majority of the dollars are in the divisions and not with directly with the superintendent, but glad to entertain any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you. Board Member Walker.
Hey, Superintendent House. I know, like I said, minute by minute, things change. And so I'm just wondering, I'm looking at our budget. I hear the last two budget reviews that we've had. And to be honest, even though we have recommendations to close the $37 million gap is a shortfall based on at least what I'm hearing inside of these. So I'm just wondering, especially with the impact that we're going to have from the blueprint, et cetera, what's the game plan? Are you nervous? Right? I know you have to go back to your team. I know you have to sort through everything we've said. I know there's reconciliation. We're going to get the new book and all of the things, and it's going to say zero. We're going to be at zero. I get it. But are you as concerned as maybe I am internally for this 37 million and how we're going to continue to support Prince George's? Maybe you can give just a general strategy for the folks out here.
Am I nervous? No, I think this is where we roll up our sleeves and do the work. I think the work led by our chief financial officer and myself is to go back to each division to determine exactly where the dollars are going to come from. We're going to get there, and we're going to ensure that while we get there, we serve the needs of our children in the manner that we need to. There's a lot of uncertainty right now with the different things that are coming out of the federal administration, but our goal is to work on this week by week to keep you all updated as much as possible to ensure that we get here. Unfortunately, I've been here before in a previous administration, not in PGCPS, but we will more than anything ensure that we update the board, let you guys know exactly what this looks like so that we can come to having a balanced budget when it's all said and done.
Chair Jackson.
Thank you, Superintendent, and Chair Goins-McCants. My question is kind of macro level question as well. So giving the change in the very fluid political landscape, my question is that knowing that there are different points of I guess, vulnerability with inside of the PGCPS enterprise, just because we have so much dependence on, different entities that help us. Have we conducted a SWOT analysis of PGCPS as a whole to look at our strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats? And with that being said, like seeing that it seems to be like different federal, or should I say, executive orders issued every other day that can impact us in different ways. So has there been any thought process around creating some type of metric or a matrix, excuse me, that can kind of understand what our vulnerability points is as it relates to ways that we can be impacted from the state or federal level from a funding standpoint?
It's a great question, Chair Jackson. And while we're continuing to unpack on a daily basis the different executive orders, a part of a so-called SWOT analysis is what we do annually during budget season. So this isn't any different. And while we don't have specific guidance to go along with these, with these executive orders, kind of things that have been thrown against the wall and people are just kind of figuring them out, I think those things are to come. But we're continuing to go back and take a look at how efficient we can be, what it is that we can do with, that we have to do with, and what it is that we can do without. So that process is ongoing, and we'll continue to stay committed to not only getting to a place where we have a balanced budget, but also ensuring, like I said earlier, that we meet the needs as well as possible of our scholars.
Thank you. And with my 19 seconds left, I'll just ask, is there a way that the board can see just from a vulnerability standpoint, like where we are as it relates to especially like federal and state funding, like where you may see opportunities to strengthen some areas, or where we're vulnerable to if they were to stop funding in a certain space? Thank you.
Yep, we'd be glad we can share kind of a pie graph of sorts of exactly where our state dollars are, where our federal dollars are. Now there have been we have been given some level of comfort that that particular federal dollars will not be touched. But again, this is a changing landscape, and what's said yesterday may not be the same information that's received tomorrow. But we'd be glad to put something together for you.
Thank you, Superintendent House. Dr. Moss?
Superintendent House, I've got a very short question, but first I want to start off and compliment you and your team for the work that you all are doing during this budget process. As someone who is new to this board, you all have made it quite easy. Folks took their time even today at the late hour to work with me and support me in the process. So I certainly want to acknowledge that. My colleagues have already spoken about where we stand from a state perspective in terms of loss of funding. Would love to hear about the ways that you and your team are actually working every day to ensure we retain those dollars. And so I know y'all aren't just sitting on your hands saying we're going to fix the budget. You all are doing work to make sure you advocate for that as well. And I think it would behoove the public to know that you're not just fixing the budget in the House, you also are working actively to make sure we keep these dollars. So do you mind sharing a little bit of that?
Yeah, it's not just the administration, it's also the board. I think we just missed each other in Annapolis yesterday because we were doing this work together. So I think it's important for the public to know that the board is working jointly with the administration to ensure that we accomplish the priorities financially of the school district. So making sure that we work with our delegates, making sure that that they understand what it is that we have to do, what we need to do, and what we want to do. And I think those are three different categories that we're continuously focused on, not only with the blueprint, but also with our operating budget, CIP, blueprint. Everything is something that we're making our constituents aware of at the state level. So I want to thank you, thank Board Chair Jackson for that continued partnership to ensure that our legislative partners understand what our needs are and how we go about getting it together.
Thank you so much. And certainly thank you. We were passing you all yesterday, but I just have to say publicly, we thank you for not just resting in your office, but actually being in Annapolis fighting to make sure our kids get every dollar they deserve.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Superintendent House. Board Member Walker.
Yeah, and just to build on that final thought for the public, I just wanted to, Superintendent House, I know you all are uncovering every single rock that you possibly can. We're fighting for dollars for our scholars. We're fighting for this 37 million and additional as we need grants, et cetera. But just reassuring people, I'm asking you to, but reassuring people that you're looking at, executive level, middle level management, all the way down. So the last thing we impact is our teachers in the school.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think you said it well. And we've said this from the beginning. Our priority is to stay as far away from the classroom in times of need in terms of financial cuts. So everything is on the table from my office, down. But again, the goal is to ensure that we stay as far away from our scholars, from our teachers as possible. And thus far, I think we've done a solid job of doing that. Of course, we were in a similar position last year in terms of cuts. And unfortunately, we're in a very similar position with some uncertainty, due to some of the federal things that are on the table. But thank you for bringing that, to fruition so the public can hear. We'll stay committed to ensuring that we stay on that same track.
Thank you, Superintendent House. Chair Jackson.
Now, and I would just like to echo the sentiments of my colleagues. I think this was the first time in a long time that we've seen Prince George's County Board of Education and the chair, and the superintendent all be on one accord, and we're fighting for the same thing in Annapolis. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And sometimes, adverse times is when leaders or people have to step up and take control. So I just want to say thank you for your support in that endeavor.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board members, do we have any more questions? Vice Chair Brown?
Yes, thank you. I was just curious as far as the temperature, if you all have heard anything from the county council and what they look to budget out to us. Because I know I've been hearing some things from some county council members, and I just kind of want, and I don't want to expose the information that I know, but I just want to get clarity if you all have heard anything additional from that office.
I'm sorry. We've been in constant communication with the OMB as of last week. The budget that we originally presented to you all, we met with the OMB. My chief financial officer, also our CIP department, did so as well. And I think we are meeting in a good place. The budget. I don't think there's any discrepancies around the needs that we brought to the table. If I'm not mistaken, and Mrs. Howell can jump in to share. There was actually an overage in terms of what they want to support us with. Ms. Howell, you want to share just a hint in this last minute and 20 seconds?
Yes, so with regards to some of the proposed legislation that's coming out, it is resulting in a shift of some of the costs from the state level to the county level. And with those shifts and changes, we wanted to make sure that we understood how that was being considered in the county's budget, which would impact our budget. And so we are on the same page with regards to some of those shifts and changes, particularly around the funding of teacher retirement, as well as the funding for our non-public placements. There's a state share, there's a local share. That split is now just shifting a greater portion of that over to the county. So they are planning for that additional funding to be provided to PGCPS above and beyond what's required in the blueprint mandate. But we're continuing to work closely with them to understand what some of those additional changes that may potentially be coming down, because it's still evolving. But as of our meeting last week, I think we're pretty closely aligned in terms of what we're expecting to receive.
Thank you.
Sure.
We've got just a little bit more time. I know there were several sections where, due to timing, people got cut off. And so if there are no more board member questions, does anyone else have anything they need to add or share for the good of the body? Seeing none, I now return the meeting to Chairman Jackson.
Thank you so much. Seeing there's no further discussion, the time is now 6:49. The meeting will recess until 7 p.m. So we have about a 10-minute recess before we reconvene. Please note that the same meeting link will be used for the public hearing. So we'll go into recess until 7 o'clock. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Barton. The time is now 7:01. Welcome back to the February 6, 2025 Prince George's County Board of Education Budget Work Session and Public Hearing for FY 2026. To those of you joining us for the first time this evening, I am Brandon Jackson, Chairman of the Prince George's County Board of Education. The Board of Education thanks you for participating in this public hearing to share your thoughts on the FY 2025 Superintendent's proposed operating budget. Your involvement is essential as we work together to address the needs of our students and staff in Prince George's County Public Schools. We're moving to item 7.0, public hearing. We will now hear from the constituents' comments. The chairman recognizes the registered speakers for the public comments. So just some ground rules. Registered speakers have 3 minutes to make their presentations and may not relinquish any part of their speaking time. The board will recognize your comments but not address them. Speakers may not address individuals or issues with profanity or derogatory terms. You will be warned once. If you continue, your comments will be muted and you may be removed from the meeting. Speakers are encouraged to use titles rather than names. For example, chairman, board member, superintendent, principal, etc. So today our first speaker is Ms. Alicia Baines, individual speaking on the budget.
Chairman Jackson, Ms. Baines is not here.
Okay, thank you. And if Ms. Baines gets back on the call, please let me know so we can put her back in the list of the rotation.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Next is Mr. Joseph Jakuta, and forgive me if I pronounced your last name wrong. Climate Parents of Prince George's County, speaking on the energy and transportation.
Mr. Jakuta is not here either.
Okay. Please let me know if Mr. Jakuta gets back on before we adjourn. Miss Monica Casanas, individual speaking on the proposed budget.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Bear with me. This is the first time that I've actually been to a hearing and that I'm testifying at a hearing. So, well, either way, good evening, Chair, board members, and Superintendent. My name is Monica Casanas, and I have the honor of serving as the Mayor of Colmar Manor. I am here to advocate for increased bilingual support at Ellen Ochoa and Gladys Noon Spellman schools. As the mayor, I have received numerous concerns from parents about the lack of access to bilingual staff in those schools. Many of our families, particularly our Spanish-speaking community, struggle to communicate with teachers and staff, which directly impacts student success and parental involvement. Parents, at least the parents in my community, they really want to be engaged in their children's education, but language barriers create unnecessary obstacles, and they feel like their concerns are going unheard, and they feel like they are not being tapped to be involved in the schools. Additionally, there is a need for stronger collaboration between our schools and local municipalities. I myself have tried reaching out to the principals and the parent outreach coordinators, only to wait weeks to receive just one reply from Principal Dana Doggett. So municipal leaders like myself, we are very eager to support our schools and the parents and families in our communities, whether through outreach efforts, community events, or connecting families with available resources. However, improved communication between the school system and local governments is essential to ensure that we are working together effectively. By increasing bilingual staff and improving outreach efforts, we can foster stronger school-family partnerships, enhance community engagement, and create a more inclusive educational environment. I urge the board to prioritize funding for bilingual support and to establish clear communication channels with local municipalities so that we can work together to serve our students and families better. There are a couple of parents that are joining tonight, and pretty much what I've been preaching to them is, yes, as mayor, I can advocate, but it's better coming from your mouth. And so I've asked them to come tonight. I'm not sure if I see them, but hopefully they'll be on to testify as well. And this is a first for all of us. Either way, thank you for your time and consideration, and I look forward to collaborating with you to strengthen our schools and community.
Thank you so much, Ms. Monica.
Chairman Jackson, Mr. Joseph Jakuta has arrived.
Okay. Mr. Joseph Jakuta, parents of Prince George's County, speaking on the energy and transportation.
Thank you. Thank you to the Board of Education for considering our testimony on the PGCPS fiscal year 26 operating budget. My name is Joseph Jakuta, and I'm representing climate parents of Prince George's County, and we're active in the county on a campaign to reduce climate change causing pollution in our schools. It's clear that PGCPS continues to make great progress in implementing the Climate Action Plan. Having read the recent reports produced by the school system, it's clear that substantial progress is being made, but funding continues to need to be provided for this important work so it can continue, especially since many of these solutions can lead to long-term cost savings for the school systems. In particular, in the FY26 operating budget, please consider these thoughts. First, solar offers a great way to save on energy costs, especially given all the tax incentives and grants available. This could even be doubled up with the high priority roof replacements, including the 21 roofs that are in need of replacement and are at the end of their life cycle. Solar canopies for parking can also be considered. While priority should be given to installing solar at schools, where you can purchase solar energy through power purchase agreements. PGCPS can already lock in steady prices for offsite solar and use these long-term contracts to help reduce the effects of volatile or electricity prices, which have been occurring a lot in the Mid-Atlantic region. It also can help avoid the need for upfront capital outlays. Also, you need to prioritize the hiring and retention of crossing guards. We cannot continue to have tragedies as we've experienced in our school system from students walking to school and getting injured on the way. Plus, it is a more sustainable way to get to school. Especially given the turbulence in the federal government right now, it's important to continue to have a contractor or staff member that has the resources to fund work finding and applying for state and philanthropic grants. Governor Moore in particular has come out to continue to provide dollars in this area in these tough economic times, and we need the funds to come to us that are being made available. We also hope you continue to fund the Student Environmental Alliance Summit and create a similar type of event for green vocational jobs. We also hope that you can provide funding for climate-friendly healthy meals and especially infrastructure for scratch cooking, shared tables, and more plant-based food options. We also would like to see continued funding for the expansion of composting, which can also save money in terms of tipping fees. Plus, it is a requirement under HB 264 that all persons, which includes schools that produce over a ton of food waste, compost. I want to thank you so much for your time and continue doing the great work that you do for our school system.
Thank you, Mr. Jakuta. The next two speakers have requested Spanish interpretation. Could we please have one of the interpreters present in the live meeting assist?
I am here to assist as a Spanish interpreter.
Thank you so much. I want to recognize Ms. Gloria Pereira, individual speaking on the proposed budget.
La señora Gloria Pereira está aquí para hablar acerca del presupuesto que se ha propuesto.
Sí, buenas tardes. Les agradezco por esta oportunidad. Quiero
Yes, good
pedirles,
afternoon.
quiero pedirles que investiguen si los fondos de las escuelas realmente se están usando para lo que se asignan.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to participate. I just want you to investigate if the funds being used for the school are being used for what they are being assigned to.
Mi hija inició el año escolar sin dos maestros, el de inglés y el de ciencias.
My daughter started the school year without two teachers, the English and the science, without the English and the science teacher.
Afortunadamente, al finalizar el segundo semestre, contrataron al maestro de ciencias.
Fortunately, by starting the second cycle, they contracted the science teacher.
Pero si ustedes acceden a Synergy, mi hija tiene un maestro de inglés asignado, del cual no ha recibido ni una sola clase.
But if you access Synergy, my daughter has an English teacher assigned, whom she has not received any of the classes.
Así que, ¿a dónde se van los fondos asignados para pagar a este maestro?
So where do the funds assigned to pay this teacher go?
También necesitamos más atención en seguridad dentro de los planteles.
We also need more security within the buildings,
ya que por la falta de seguridad hay peleas incontrolables dentro de las escuelas.
Due to the lack of security, there's a lot of fights inside the schools.
Además de mejorar en futuras escuelas el diseño de los baños, ya que en mi escuela en particular no cumplen con la función de proteger la privacidad de los niños.
So besides arranging to make schools better, also provide for designing bed and bathrooms, as the school my daughter attends to does not have the privacy that is needed.
Ya que niños y niñas entran al mismo baño sin restricción ni separación, lo cual ha generado múltiples casos de acoso sexual.
So same boys and girls go to the same bathroom, which has generated a lot of sexual harassment.
Y como punto final, me gustaría y les pido encarecidamente que asignen fondos para el área de traductores.
And as my last point, I ask and I plead that you assign more funds to interpreters.
Ya que en escuelas como Ellen Ochoa y Gladys Nunes Pellman no hay traductores y no podemos tener una adecuada comunicación con los maestros y directivos.
In the two schools, Ochoa and Ellen Spellman, is not an interpreter available, and so we're not able to communicate with the staff and the teachers.
Muchas gracias y espero que escuchen mis puntos y tomen una decisión.
Thank you very much, and I do hope you listen to my point and then you make a decision.
Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias.
Next up, we'll also need a Spanish interpreter. It's Miss Mirna Gonzalez.
Ms.
La próxima.
Gonzalez is not here. If she arrives, I will let you know.
Thank you so much, Miss Barton. Next, we have Michelle Clark.
I just joined you as a participant. Okay, thank you for allowing us this chance to have input on the budget. I'm Michelle Clark. I'm an early childhood special educator at Kenmore Early Childhood Center. And I heard one of the previous speakers say something about contract teachers. Now, I have just heard this from another colleague of mine that there are some contract teachers that are out in some schools, which is news to PGCEA, the union, and that needs to be looked at. And that's not what we should be funding. We need to fund educators who are going to be committed to staying in our schools. I personally have been here, this is my 21st year, and I've seen a number of different schools, and most of my schools have been Title I schools. The Early Childhood Center, I don't think is designated that way. And I've seen the needs. Our schools our rundown, I know that's capital and not this budget, but there are things we could do to make them better. And there are things we can do to encourage people to come and join Prince George's County Schools. Many people consider us the training ground for other school districts. People come in, they get trained up, they come in conditionally, they get the training, they get fully certified, and then they leave to places where they get paid better. We really need to do something about this to keep the committed people in our county. And I know that our superintendent has included some things and money in this budget for negotiations, which is great. But we need some programs that do something for the folks who stay and who give us more support. I can tell you in our building, there are currently 3 classrooms without a special educator in our pre-K classes. So there are children who basically aren't getting service on a regular basis. I am surprised parents have not come for us yet. It's a sad situation, and it's not like the rest of us could. I mean, we can do the paperwork, but we can't also service the children. So it's just not possible. You can't be in 2 places at once. And so whatever you can do through this budget to address some of these things, we absolutely need to do that. We have to address the teacher shortage here in Prince George's County. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. And thank you for your service as well.
Thank you.
Chairman Jackson, Ms. Gonzalez has now joined the meeting. We'll be moving her over shortly.
Okay, the chair recognizes Ms. Gonzalez.
El presidente reconoce a la señora González.
Can you call her name one more time, please?
Por favor, la señora González puede pasar al frente y hablar. Se le da el espacio.
Hola, buenas noches a todos y todas.
Hello, good evening to all.
Estamos aquí en esta reunión para expresar nuestras situaciones que estamos viviendo en las escuelas de la Ellen Ochoa.
We're here in this meeting to express our concerns that we have in the schools de Ellen Ochoa.
Queremos obtener ideas de cómo mejorar nuestra problemática y también tenemos otras peticiones.
We want ideas on how we can resolve our problems that we have in other situations.
En comunidad estamos trabajando en sobre una carta con la que exponemos nuestros puntos que queremos que den una solución positiva.
In our community, we're working on getting a letter together where we put all of our points where we need some to get our points across.
El primero está sobre la transportación. Están llegando demasiado tarde a nuestro pueblo los estudiantes.
The first one is based on transportation. Our students are getting home very late.
Segundo, sería también la ausencia de maestros en algunas clases. Entonces ya estamos para terminar el año y esta problemática sí afecta directamente al estudiante.
The second one is about the absence. The other one is about absences of teachers in some of the classes. We're about to finish their second cycle, and this is affecting the education.
Otro punto también tenemos lo que es, necesitamos traductor en las escuelas a nuestro idioma.
Another point is that we need interpreters at the schools.
Y también sería con respecto a la infraestructura de la escuela, que los baños pues sean rotulados conforme al sexo de cada estudiante.
And the other situation is in regards to the bathrooms, that the bathrooms have titles according to the student gender.
Eso es todo.
And that's all.
I'm sorry, did that complete her comments?
Perdón, ¿eso completa todos sus comentarios?
Sí, es
Yes.
correcto. Muchas gracias por escucharnos.
Yes, it's correct. Thank you very much for listening to us.
Thank you so much. The board chair now recognizes.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. The board chair now recognizes Ms. Dolores Millhouse, individual speaking on FY26 proposed operating budget.
Good evening. Thank you for having me this morning. As I'm looking at the budget and attending several of your meetings, I have some concerns about how everything is being communicated to the community as a whole. In the presentation, I keep hearing this 37.3 million potential, well, not even potential deficit that we have to close, but I'm not hearing exactly how we are working to close the $37.3 million deficit. And it's not clear when I look at the budget itself, on when we're talking about redistributing funds and where we're moving things and where we're consolidating. It's not clear based on the budget that was proposed and how the meetings are coming about, how these updates are being actually communicated to the public so I can begin to do a crosswalk. When I'm looking at how we are communicating what's happening, it's very difficult. So that drives me to go and look at the communication and community engagement portion of the budget. And when I look at that, I saw in the budget itself that the title of chief is still there. So in looking at the roles and responsibility, I'm just trying to figure out, what is there a decrease in the budget? Because I saw a I think it's $76,000 increase, and I'm hoping that $79,8200 increase. How is that supporting and strengthening the communication and engagement for the school system? And then I look at the presentation and I see $184,000 communication specialist for the Board of Education. How does that support communication and engagement to the community? So I'm seeing some enhances, and I can't really crosswalk it to see where there was a reduction to support that. So did that increase the 37? Well, to bring us to the 37.3 million. So as you can see, there's a lot of opportunity for the school system to do a better job in really identifying what we're looking at, so I can articulate where I would hope that we could identify cost savings. But I do want to make sure that when we're looking at the Office of Communication and Community Engagement, that it's critical that you all understand the role and responsibility of that department to engage with the constituents on what may be looming as budget cuts. But I also have the question for the Board of Education, as I see that you all have several questions for administration. My question is, who is questioning you all about the budget that you all have? Who is going through to see how the expenditures are being allocated or being utilized? When I look at your budget, I see about $59,000. So what are we doing with that for operating expenses, supplies, and materials? And so if we can do a better job in communicating what's being done, how those funds are being utilized, and the impact and how the value added is happening, that would be really great. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mel. Ms. Shannon Reed.
Good evening. About 2 years ago, I considered completing a referral for a student I thought still may be developing English language proficiency because she never participated in class. She was in a class with students with terrible conduct, but she listened attentively and worked hard. Her work ethic was nothing short of phenomenal. She clearly studied when she went home. She always met with me for reading instruction after school, and she always asked for me for feedback on her writing. This year, when I went to see my own daughter's AP scores from her junior year, I saw that student's name twice. I clapped. Chronic patterns of underachievement can be changed with adequate resources, high expectations, effective instruction, strong accountability, and qualified teachers. Instead, PGCPS remains dedicated to its heavy reliance on administration based on the current proposal that requests additional increases beyond the combined 27 million increase allocated during the 24 and 25 budget cycles. That additional money spent produced few or negligible averages in student achievement, according to PGCPS's data dashboard. In 2024, the average ELA proficiency scores for third graders decreased slightly from 48 to 46.5. Fourth graders increased 2%, fifth graders increased a little less than 2%, sixth graders decreased about 7%, seventh graders essentially remained the same, eighth graders decreased about 6%, and the 10th grade average decreased about 2%. This is telling since during the 24 and 25 budget cycles, an additional 34 million was used for mid-level administration. Math scores alone make it clear that PGCPS's approach of top-heavy administration does not help students and teachers. The recent changes in board representatives show that parents expect and want something different. Yet, the current budget seems to use the available resources to maintain the current pattern, systems, and practices. Have you considered how using so much time and so many resources on students who can and should work limits what is available for SPED and multilingual learners? Many students with typical development are in no better position socially, emotionally, or academically after years and years of summer school. In the words of Frederick Douglass, if there is no struggle, there is no progress. Summer school, EOP, evening school, and any other path that allows students to avoid the struggle is ultimately detrimental to students who proceed to the next grade magnificently dependent. Has PGCPS considered how the load of too many underdeveloped students impacts the student, the teacher, and the system as a whole? Right now, 13 of my 157 students are identified as on track based on their first benchmark in English 10. It is exhausting to have so many students who are so far behind and who still do not work, even though they are fully capable of learning. Most of these students would benefit from mandatory tutoring and mandatory reading clinics. Reading is thinking, so it will help students with math too. Please consider allocating an adequate amount to facilitate this type of instructional support. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. There was one written comment from Ms. Alicia Baines, who wrote on the budget. There are no pre-recorded comments. And thank you all who spoke tonight. We appreciate your comments. Thank you all for watching and joining us. There being no further business, the time is now 7:28. The February 6, 2025 Prince George's County Board of Education Budget Work Session and Public Hearing for FY 2026 is adjourned. Good night.